Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of North Dundas, today being August 27, 2025. Before I call the meeting to order, I just want to give a brief update on the challenges that we're all aware of and that we're all facing in the Township of North Dundas, well, right across the South Nation Conservation Area. Right across the area, we're all facing water challenges, water concerns, but more specifically to what's going on in the Township of North Dundas. Many are aware that level 3 has been issued by the South Nation Conservation Authority. I do believe that's the top level. And so we are in strange and unusual circumstances. We are working hard as the corporation staff are working hard with Aqua to answer the challenges that we face, and they are challenges. There's been several conversations held by staff with several of our large users and many conversations with our largest user. And it's about the need to conserve water. Those challenges are out there. The ideas are going back and forth. There's different strategies that are taking place to ensure that there's still quality water delivered to the residential users in North Dundas, both Winchester and Chesterville. I just want to express that, and I know it's been out there and a concern about our large users and what things are being done. Well, the challenges have been issued to them about the need to conserve and to find strategies to continue conserving. And but the challenge that staff face and Aqua is to ensure that we continue delivering quality water to the residents of both Winchester and Chesterville. And that is our goal, that is our focus. I'm sure there's other questions to be had, but I really don't have a lot of answers and I can't commit to things that aren't decided yet, so I'll just leave it at that. So call the meeting to order. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 4:34 p.m. and then we're going to move to adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Do I have a mover? Councillor Uhrig, seconder, Councillor Lennox. That the agenda be adopted as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? See none, that's carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none. We're going to move into the public meetings section of the agenda. Anyone who's in attendance for the public meeting is asked to sign the attendance sheet. Has that taken place? Has everyone signed the attendance sheet? Fair enough. And so we'll ask Director Pohl to start the presentation. Director Pohl.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser. So we're looking at a public meeting this evening on a zoning amendment with regard to the property at 9896 Marionville Road. Before council can consider a zoning bylaw, we just go through some of the legal implications that are associated with the zoning amendment, and it only a specified person, a public body, or a registered owner making oral submissions or written submissions at or before this public meeting can appeal the decision of the Council of the Township of North Dundas to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So a very limited number of people can actually appeal anymore a zoning amendment. So the one we're considering this evening is a zoning amendment. The applicant is looking to rezone the subject lands from agricultural exception 15 to agricultural special exemption 45. So there'll be a new number assigned to this property should the amendment go through. So the legal description for the property is part of Lot 13, Concession 12. It's Part 1 on Reference Plan 8R 4727 in the former Township of Winchester, which is now the Township of North Dundas. And as I noted earlier, it's municipally known as 9896 Marionville Road, Russell, Ontario. So part of the public consultation is we're required to give notice of the public meeting, and signs were posted on the property in accordance with the Planning Act on August 7th, and also a notice of the public meeting was mailed out to all property owners, agencies, and public bodies, and all the notices are within 120 meters. So it also went to the Township of Russell because this is the boundary line. The north properties on the other side of the road are in the Township of Russell, so those owners were also all notified of this public meeting. So on the background, the existing use of the property is a residential dwelling with a school bus depot in the back, which includes the maintenance of buses, automotive repairs, and truck repairs are allowed on the property. The proposed use is to add outdoor storage of recreational vehicles, recreational trailers, and boats, in addition to the existing permitted uses on the property. The official plan has it in a special land use district that allows for the bus depot and a residential dwelling, as well as the commercial garage and the other uses that were in the list. In addition to that, there's a notation under the official plan that allows similar uses of size and scope on the subject property. The zoning bylaw, as I mentioned earlier, is currently AG 15, and AG 45 is what they're proposing to change the zoning to. And the lot area is approximately 2.39 acres or 1 hectare. So the proposed use, as I noted earlier, is to rezone the property. The effect of the approval will be that outdoor storage of recreational vehicles, recreational trailers, and boats will be permitted in addition to the uses currently allowed under the current zone that it's under. Part of the process of looking at a zoning amendment is to consider the provincial policy planning statement. So that talks about promoting diversification of economic base and employment under section 251. Also support a diversified rural economy by directing non-agricultural related uses and development to areas where it will minimize constraints on existing agricultural uses. That's under section 264. It also talks about encouraging intensification of employment uses to support the achievement of complete communities. Another consideration is the official plan, and as I noted, it does allow for similar uses, so we didn't require an official plan amendment, because if you're storing an RV, it's just a different color than a bus in some cases. If you're looking from above, the use is very, very similar in RVs and that sort of thing, boats. It's very similar to storing buses, so they did not require an official plan amendment for this particular application. So the county supports compact development that integrates residential, commercial, employment, and community and recreational uses. And there's provisions in there that allow for outdoor storage and display areas through landscaping, buffering, screening to avoid land use conflicts. The neighbor is a commercial garage, so there's not really conflicts in that regard, and the other neighbor's agricultural uses. There's very little change with respect to what's being proposed. So we did receive comments from the counties saying they didn't require an official plan amendment with this application, and we received no comments from the neighbors. The applicant did consult with the neighbors to make sure there was no issues with regard to his proposal, and they did not comment with regard to this application. So from here, I'll pass it back to the mayor for questions and comments from the public.
Thank you, Director Paul. And I see someone that just entered the council chambers. You need to get your name on the roll sheet somewhere. Pardon? Oh, okay. Not involved in this. No, that's fine. Unless you think you might make a comment. Then don't bother. Thank you, though. So yes, comments from the public in attendance. Any comments from the public in attendance about this zoning amendment? Except for fellow from Watson Associates, no comment. Seeing none, is the applicant present? Would you wish to make a comment? So.
It'd be weird if you didn't.
It'd be a first, wouldn't it? Okay, so thank you for that, and thank you for attending, and your initiative to make sure this goes through. So, any no comments from council? This concludes the public meeting portion of today's meeting. So, thank you very much, Mr. Paul. We're going to move on to development services, and going to done on Director Paul once again. It's about 2625079 Ontario Inc. It's a CIP. And do I have a mover? Councillor Lennox, Councillor Uhrig. Be it resolved, the council approve a facade improvement grant of $5,000 for 2625079 Ontario Inc. under the Township of North Dundas's Community Improvement Plan for the building located at 12026 Dolly Drive, Winchester, and that council authorize the mayor and CAO to execute the required agreement. Mr. Pohl.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser, members of council. So we have an application for CIP funding for our community improvement plan funding. The total project is $12,300 to do facade improvements to this building. It'll be great improvement along Dolly Drive, and the maximum grant is $5,000 towards this project. The committee has looked at it and is making the recommendation to approve the application.
Thank you. Questions, comments from members of council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Move on to bylaw number 2025-44. It's the zoning bylaw amendment, AG to AG 44. Moved by Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Annable. Be it resolved that Council of the Township of North Dundas deems that no further notice is to be given as per Section 3417 of the Planning Act in respect to bylaw number 2025-44, as a commercial garage is being removed as a permitted use as it does not conform with the county official plan, and that bylaw number 2025-44 being a revised bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 12-93 to amend the zoning of the property at 13645 County Road 9, Chesterfield, Ontario from ag to agricultural special exemption 44 be read a third and final time in open council, signed and sealed this 27th day of August 2025. Mr. Pohl.
So this is a follow-up on our public meeting we had back in May of this year. The United Counties required an official plan amendment before we could pass the bylaw. That was looked at and considered with different aspects of what was being required. They were looking for two different studies. The owners, given the requirements and the costs involved and the uncertainty, have reconsidered their application. I did reach out to Wayne Codwell, who is a professor at the University of Guelph. I've known him for many, many years, and he's kind of the guru for developments in agricultural land, what's allowed, what's not allowed. He helped draft a lot of the policies that are in the provincial documents. And it's provincial documents that are one of the ones that we have to consider when we're looking at amendments. In the commercial garage was one of the elements that do we include or not include, and what do you have to do to justify that? He noted that in Huron County, when he's an employee there at one time, they allow it as a home industry. Up to 6 cars can be repaired. So in this particular case, it may be something council wants to look at in the future. Do we amend our bylaws to allow this as of a right on properties that are a certain distance away from residential, which this one is? You could be allowed to have repairs up to 6 cars as a home industry. So that's something we can look at in the future. But in the interim, the owner is looking to just get this through as far as farm machinery equipment and farm vehicles that he can repair and offer those to continue on with that in the interim. So that was one of his comments that he was looking for. So what I've got before council is two things. One is because we're changing the bylaw from the original public meeting, council has to determine, do you want to give further notice because you're changing the bylaw or not? But because we're removing something, there's not really a big change for the neighbors. You're actually removing a use, so that's why I've recommended that no further notice be given. And this will be the third and final reading of the bylaw because council gave first and second reading at the last meeting in May. So that'll be third and final reading for this bylaw.
Thank you, Director Pohl. Questions, comments, Deputy Mayor?
I just have some comments. I have to commend you for taking the time to save Mr. Kavanaugh money and a lot of time to do the same thing where the activities, it's still the same activities that that are going to occur. It's just a different write-up, I guess you could call it. And so I don't see why it has to go for another revision. I think a third reading now is quite appropriate.
Thank you. Further? Councillor Lennox?
I agree with Deputy Mayor on all points. First, again, I commend you as well. This package, well put together, provided excellent background. You found a solution for a resident who wants to operate commercially. You were creative. You put together a lot of background research into it, including from the PhD source. Also, I agree that we don't really have to go for another reading of this.
Further? Yes. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Urick.
Yeah, again, thank you, Calvin. I think just from my vantage point, I would just, if you could, just indulge a little bit, just in terms of what the real like hiccup in all of this is, because like if you can still, in essence, perform the same type of work, where is it that commercial garage is like the gray area, so to speak?
If I may,
Please
Mr.
go ahead.
It's, one of the legal requirements is they want a justification that you can't provide this service in one of the villages where there is commercial garages or there is a vacant garage right now in Chesterville. So you'd have to demonstrate that that's not a possibility, this is the only option available, and you have to justify it in agricultural land rather than in rural land. If it's a rural property, we wouldn't have to do it, but it is an agricultural property and surrounded by agricultural. That's the little hiccup on that.
Yep.
Why you can't do a commercial garage in an agricultural area.
Right. Okay, perfect. Makes sense. Thank you, Calvin.
Thank you, and I echo some of the comments from my fellow council members. Director Paul, one of the challenges that has been issued from council over the years is that we find a way to yes, and so you're commended on finding a way to yes, and it's an appropriate way to yes, as you described. It fits, and it's just the terminology I think that was being used that threw it aside. But thank you again for all your efforts. Saying all that, all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. And then we have a KAR, Director Paul, about from IESO, the Independent Electoral System Operator.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser. So we do have the windows opened up again for the next phase from the province to invite people to create energy in Ontario or store energy through battery storage. That's open. It has opened now. There's 2 phases to that through the opening. So what I've proposed under this going forward, as some members of council were aware of our last open house that we held on the battery storage, how poorly that went. So what I propose is a set of criteria that could maybe we bring back to the next meeting of council to adopt as a policy for these kind of things going forward. Council has the option of doing a blanket resolution that accepts any and all forms of energy in the township, a blanket resolution that says, yes, we'll accept them, or you deal with each one individually. And my recommendation is we deal with each one individually because we don't know where it's going to be located, on prime agricultural land or not, on rural land. Is it close to housing? Is it far away from housing? And what are the distance separations that you should have for some of these? So my recommendation is deal with them individually as applications come forward, as we dealt with the last ones. And set some criteria so if they do come and we do an open house, we get proper advertising out there that everybody knows about it and can attend the meetings. Get a proper moderator at these meetings is one of the other requirements that I was suggesting we have. A good PowerPoint presentation that's clear, not too technical, but that's clear in plain language for people to understand and get their questions answered. The last one, we had a lot of unanswered questions. People held their hand up for the entire meeting and never got a question in. People took over the presentation and wouldn't allow other people to speak. So get a real good moderator that can handle a meeting and have that as criteria that they have to follow if they're going to come to this township and get our support as a municipality. Therefore, you're going to follow these rules and advertise and tell everybody what you're doing before you get support. So that's a recommendation to council to bring that back as a policy going forward. We are allowed to do this, so that's what I'm saying. It's probably a good idea based on our last one to get that in place.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. Questions, comments? Councillor Lennox? Look at it. Eurig.
No, thank you, Calvin. I would argue that there's still unanswered questions even following the last one. But anyhow, no, I do agree with you that we should be dealing with these case by case. At least personally, I don't have a grave opposition to understanding that there's a need to create some level of electricity for the provincial power network. But I do think that the way in which certainly the battery storage individuals tried to operate here in North Dundas and just sort of try to roll in and just figure everybody would welcome with open arms. I do think there's a definite need to have proper and fulsome conversations with the community that's going to be impacted. And as you mentioned, that evening in Morwood, I think it got off the rails from the very beginning, and it never got back, and it wasn't going to. So I think anything we can do to get ahead of something like that is in our best interest. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Urick. Further? Excuse me. Yeah, the last application that we received and the presentation that was delivered in Morwood, I was involved many times on the phone with one of the proponents, and Director Pohl and I had conversations in between phone calls about the challenges, and I expressed to the proponent not many times, 4 times probably in conversations, that to hold a meeting close. They weren't sure where Morwood was, and didn't understand that that was the biggest center that needed to be held. And I did try to coordinate with them that they hold the meeting, and I wanted to be present. And I think I was caught off guard when they scheduled it on a day that I wasn't available to be present, and it was, and I think we as council members had to deflect that. It was like try to pull the blanket over our eyes, pull the wool over our eyes as a community with the way they're organizing the meeting, and it certainly was that. I don't know who attended that's here, but that meeting, I gather they had 12 muffins and 20 cups of coffee available for a full Morwood RA, full with people, and they were surprised that I think they thought that on a Friday night no one would show up, and people did, and people were upset that it was planned for a Friday night, and their upset was voiced. So I did have a chance after that meeting. I ran into some people from IESO at a conference, and I described quite plainly how that was managed and how the fault lays at their feet as well for allowing a proponent like that to deliver a message like that to our community, and that they might have eliminated all possibility of anything happening in North Dundas with the way that was conducted. The taste that's left in people's mouths from that presentation is going to be hard to overcome, but I think I was a supporter of the idea, not of the group. But I think we need this package here, and I do agree we do need to do it on a case-by-case basis. But IESO has to really step up and ensure that the people that are going to be proponents are prepared to be proponents, and not just someone showing up with images that you can't see, information that's not realistic, and a lack of answers. I know the chief was challenged to come up with answers, to reach out and find answers about some of the concerns from the public, and he wasn't able to get anything really clear to deliver to the public. And it's unfortunate that in this time of need of better energy sources, that the province has allowed that sort of thing to take place. So I look forward to positive things happening from this. Anyway, I think the message has been delivered that we want to see what you're proposing, and on a case-by-case. Okay. After all of that, a request for lot frontage. A request for lot frontage exemption for 10385 Clark Road in Mountain. A mover. Councillor Urick and Deputy Mayor. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Be it resolved that Council hereby exempts the agricultural lands being part of Lot 5, Concession 6, former Township of Mountain, now the Township of North Dundas, County of Dundas, roll number 05110110065300, PIN number 661050150, from the lot frontage on an open year-round maintained public road requirement contained in Section 8.12.13.3.12 of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry Official Plan, subject to the said lands being rezoned to prohibit any dwelling, building, or structure this 27th day of August 2025. Mr. Pohl.
So this is a follow-up on the key information we supplied in July 2nd, the last meeting of council, or second to last meeting of council. We're looking at a condition on the severance to prohibit any dwelling, building, or structure because it doesn't have road frontage. We don't want to have the fire department have to go to some site and can't reach it if there's a building on fire. So this is why we're putting that kind of condition on there, and that becomes part of this resolution, so the person can have an agricultural parcel but doesn't have road frontage. You can see on the image there where the road allowance extends is the red line. So.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Pohl, I have one question. Is this going to be considered a separate lot where, let's say, down the road, 20 years, someone could decide to sell this piece? And if this piece could be sold, then there should probably be a condition that it could only be sold if that right-of-way actually becomes a road, or if on the Clark Road there's a right-of-way to go to that property.
We could look at that. It would have to be a condition on the severance to get registered on title.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. We're going to move on to bylaw number 2025-64, zoning bylaw amendment, AG 15 to AG 45. Moved by Councillor Lennox, seconded by Councillor Annable. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2025-64, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 12-96 is amended to amend the zoning of the property at 9896 Marionville Road from the agricultural special exemption 15 AG 15 to the agricultural special exception 45 AG 45 to permit the outdoor storage of recreational vehicles, recreational trailers, and boats in addition to existing permitted uses be passed and enacted this 27th day of August 2025. Mr. Poole.
So this is a follow-up to our public meeting earlier this evening. This is the bylaw to enact that. I believe you have 6 votes on this one.
Questions, comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to finance. Mr. Stanley. 110-25 investment policy. A mover. Councillor Lennox. Deputy Mayor is the seconder. Be resolved that council adopt the investment policy number 110-25 as presented this 27th day of August 2025. Mr. Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The Finance Department has been developing policies and procedures to formalize processes that we are currently undertaking. This particular policy provides guiding principles for our investment practices. Our bank account does currently earn interest. So the intention of this policy is to capitalize on investment opportunities when market conditions yield more favorable rates of return than our current bank interest rate. We anticipate only to use these investment vehicles during periods where we have excess cash, such as after a tax due date, when our bank balances are high, and to have these investment vehicles mature when our bank balances are lowest, being late fall and throughout the winter. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Stanley. On to fire. Chief Raystrick, bylaw number 2019-41, open air burn bylaw amendment. Moved by Councillor Lennox, seconded by Councillor Uhrig. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-41, being a bylaw to regulate the setting of fires in the open air within the Township of North Dundas, be approved as amended this 27th day of August 2025. Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Well, as prefaced by your opening comments, Mayor, about the current conditions we're facing, the bylaw amendment will address some of those concerns that we have. The bylaw will be more reflective of our current environmental challenges that we have, and the revisions will allow staff to enact a total ban. The biggest changes to the bylaw as it sits right now will be the definition of restricted versus a total fire ban, and the inclusion of fireworks. They were completely excluded from previous bylaws. This bylaw will be brought back at a later date. I have a few minor changes, most notably would be the settlement boundaries that need to be adjusted. But with the urgency of the current conditions, I felt it more important to bring this bylaw and be able to enact a total ban at this time.
Thank you, and thank you for your efforts. Questions, comments? It definitely is needed. I know my time on the fire service and Councillor Lennox's as well, that the bylaw did allow certain activities to take place, recreational fires, campfires, if you would, and but with the current conditions, it was imperative that the chief fire official needed to weigh in and make those changes for many reasons, but mostly because of we don't want to overwhelm or challenge our water availability through something as simple as just not holding a recreational fire during this time. The water challenges we face are immense, and we need to take all measures possible to ensure, and moving forward, because I'm not a denier of climate change, but these things have to be managed in a different fashion moving forward. So I look forward to this being received and with a great level of understanding from the public. Any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Lennox.
Yeah, just under this in the existing policy are the fines and et cetera. With the bylaw that you intend on bringing forward, do you plan on increasing those fines to represent more of cost recovery or the increased cost of a negligent burn?
At this time, no, we have not decided to up the cost for the fines. We do have cost recovery included in our bylaw in fees and schedules, so that is an option that we could exercise should someone be deliberately negligent.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Moving on to transportation, Director Cheney, your key information report on the Henderson Municipal Drain.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser, members of council. So council remembers February 29th of 2024, they appointed Monica Shea to Shade Group to undertake an update of Henderson Creek Municipal Drain. At the November 7th, 2024 council meeting, staff brought forward a KIR for council's interest in the findings to date from Shade Group. What was observed, discussed, and the next steps were brought forward to council. Due to favorable conditions in November and December of 2024 and again in May of 2025, all next steps were completed except the on-site meeting with residents. On July 25th of this year, a total of 659 invites were sent out to residents in Winchester who formed the watershed, informing them of the on-site meeting to discuss Shade Group's findings, a brief explanation of the Drainage Act, and what the next steps should be. The meeting was held on August 5th, 2025 at the Joel Steele Arena's ice surface. The turnout was great, with 91 residents and 1 representative from South Nation Conservation attending. Monica explained in full detail all her findings, had visual aids to show where the drain was, and had an FAQ set up to help answer questions. Residents were engaged, asked lots of questions, left questions on the comment cards available, and the feedback was positive. We informed the residents that no action would take place until we had a definite plan in place, and that we would have another on-site meeting to inform all of those in the watershed.
Thank you for that report. Councillor Lennox and then Councillor Urick.
Director Cheney, what was one of the most brought up questions from the 91 residents that showed up?
Through you, Mayor Fraser, to Councillor Lennox, how much is this going to cost me?
Fair enough.
Thank you for your question. Councillor Urick.
Yeah, that's the one I've heard the most too, because I live in this watershed location and enough of my neighbors have asked. But I do think there was some discontent among some of my neighbors of the timing of the meeting, given that it was during the daytime, but I did encourage anybody who could get there to get there. That's not a direct reflection on you or your department or anything like that, Jamie, just in general. But I am happy to see that 91 residents at least were able to show up. I know there is quite a bit of questions still, and I think will be, even as this goes forward, just given that there is such a varying degree of decay or whatever you would like to call it along this stretch, given, from this corner across town. So I do think there will be a lot more here, but I think what's been done thus far has certainly done well to engage those involved, and so I appreciate that much, and we'll see where it goes from here. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
There's nothing further. Yes, it was a big challenge to gather people together, and the challenge always is, how do you satisfy the most? And I think through experience, it's tough to satisfy the majority, but the message will be spread. And I do, with our communications that we have in place now, I anticipate that more information will be going out. I see that there's a change in the way communication is being delivered, and I get feedback from residents that they're pleased with the level of communication, so I anticipate that this is the tool we'll continue to use to provide information, whatever way we can, to those residents connected. And I get there'd be a level of upset, and I look at some ag people that live that. They're used to the idea of drainage works and costs and challenges and pricing, but for Councillor Urick, it'd be a foreign idea that this is going to take place, and it could be perceived as quite onerous. So keep up the good work. That's the challenge. And then we're going to move on to bylaw number 2025-65, Reynolds Municipal Drain, Section 78, request for major improvement works and engineer appointment. And a mover and Deputy Mayor, and a seconder is Councillor Urick. Be it resolved that council accept the request for major improvement works RSO 1990 CD 17 sub 7811 to the Reynolds Municipal Drain in the former township of Winchester. And that bylaw number 2025 being a bylaw to appoint Monica Shade of Shade Group, Inc. as the drainage engineer for major improvement works to the Reynolds Municipal Drain be passed and enacted this 27th day of August 2025. Director Cheney.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser, members of council. Reynolds Municipal Drain runs northeasterly on the south edge of Winchester and outlets into the Henderson Creek Municipal Drain System. There's a discrepancy in the 1990 engineer's report from Ainley Graham and Associates Limited, bylaw number 91-12, where the drain is located. In order to rectify this issue, a drainage engineer will need to be appointed and a major improvement will need to be conducted in order to update the engineer's report. Excuse me.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Bylaw number 2025-52, request for new assessment for maintenance and engineer appointment, Section 76, West Branch of the Kittle Creek Municipal Drain and the Henry Elliott Municipal Drain, and is moved by Councillor Lennox, seconded by Councillor Annable. Be it resolved that council accept the request for a new assessment schedule for maintenance under RSO 1990 C.D.17 S.76 2006 C.19 Schedule A S.6.1 of the Drainage Act for the West Branch of the Kittle Municipal Drain and the Henry Elliott Municipal Drain in the former township of Winchester, and that bylaw number 2025-52 being a bylaw to appoint Monica Shade of Shade Group, Inc. as the drainage engineer to prepare a new assessment schedule for the maintenance of the West Branch of the Kittle Creek Municipal Drain and the Henry Elliott Municipal Drain in the former township of Winchester be passed and enacted this 27th day of August 2025. Director Cheney.
Thank you, Mayor Fraser. As council has seen before, we've been updating some of our assessment schedules in our municipal drains. We've had some maintenance requests received for the West Branch of the Kittle Creek as well as the Henry Elliott Municipal Drain. Total combined length of the above municipal drains is approximately 4.8 kilometers. The current assessment schedule is out of date, and as there have been many severances and land use changes since adopted in 1975. An up-to-date and fair assessment schedule is required as part of the Drainage Act to conduct work and levy the costs to the watershed.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? None, that's carried. Thank you, Director Cheney. We're going to move on to Recreation and Culture, Director Meerberg. The lease agreement, Rideau St. Lawrence Family Health Team, and that's moved by Councillor Urick and Councillor Annable. Second by Councillor Annable, sorry. Be it resolved that council authorize the mayor and director of Recreation and Culture to execute a lease agreement with the Rideau St. Lawrence Family Health Team for continued occupancy of the lower level office space at 547 St. Lawrence Street, Winchester, for a term of 3 years commencing May 7, 2025 and ending May 8, 2028 at an annual rental rate of $5,000 plus HST. Ms. Meerberg.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Council is asked to authorize execution of a new 3-year lease agreement with the Rideau St. Lawrence Family Health Team for the lower level space at 547 St. Lawrence Street. Since 2021, the Rideau St. Lawrence Family Health Team has contributed $5,000 per year annually as a donation while sharing space with the Seaway Valley Community Health Center, which has since vacated the space. Approving this lease secures continued access to local not-for-profit healthcare services, ensures revenue for the township, and maintains use of municipal space. The financial terms are consistent with the previous agreement and were included in the 2025 approved budget.
Thank you. Questions, comments? I think we're very fortunate in North Dundas to have the Rideau St. Lawrence Family Health Team here in North Dundas. And I remember years ago when we were advocating for things like that to come to the community, and I look forward to that relationship continuing. It's important for many of our residents that they're there, and this is another good thing. So all those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Ms. Meerberg, relocation of Meet Me on Main Street events to municipal parks, and that's moved by Deputy Mayor and Councillor Lennox, seconded by Councillor Lennox. Be it resolved that Council approve the relocation of all Meet Me on Main Street events to municipal parks beginning in 2026. Ms. Meerberg.
Staff recommend that council approve the relocation of all Meet Me on Main Street events from street closure to municipal parks starting in 2026. A review of the 2025 series identified strong attendance and community engagement, but also highlighted major challenges including vehicle intrusion risks, limited shade and amenities, complicated road closures, and heavy staffing demands for our barricade operations. By moving to municipal parks, events would benefit from improved safety, access to amenities that we have there, so washrooms, play structures, cooling areas. There would also be cost savings, so no porta potties would be required, and there's also a stronger family appeal, so showing off the amenities that we already have that we've put in place for the public, and we're proud of those. Winchester's success with its park-based format provides a proven example for us. Recommended park locations have been identified in each hamlet in my report, with events expected to remain cost neutral while improving overall quality and accessibility.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Uhrig.
No, I would say this is a welcome change in the evolution of these events. Having done the last 2 summers at least up here in Winchester, up at the 100 Club, it's a no-brainer if you attend it. With the park there, the gazebo there, the pool there, the arena can be open as needed, for washrooms, whatever, right? So moving it to these types of locations, and certainly the opportunity to showcase the new park in Hallville too through this, it makes complete sense. And I know there'll be some naysayers, it's not on Main Street, whatever, but again, they don't see the legwork and the back stuff that happens in the background just to simply close a street, and to remove that type of headache just makes sense. So thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your thoughts. Other comments? Deputy Mayor.
Quick comment, maybe we should change it to Meet Me at the Park instead of Meet Me on Main. Just a thought, Mr. Mayor.
You are right. Thank you for your thought, Deputy Mayor. Anything further? And to my thought on that, as Councillor Uhrig, I don't think that was directed at me about not wanting to change your mind, but I know early days when we had this discussion, staff during a debrief was commenting about everything was recent, but this year's one of this year's events, there was a challenge. A driver bypassed the barricade and was quite adamant that that driver was quite adamant that they had the right to use the road and essentially get out of the way. I'm coming through, and cause some upset and concern for a staff member, which I do not want. None of us want that to happen because for fear of what could be next, as if it escalates. And but to your point, Councillor Uhrig, seeing how well it operates at the 100 Club Park here in Winchester, and to see the kids running and having fun, the parents' sense of ease that the kids can be kids and they're still in a safe environment within view, and I think how it's evolved, to your words, how it's evolved to the point where, with some things have gone on in society and people being injured, and because of people bypassing barricades, we need to be mindful of safety of our residents. This is a family activity. It's meant to bring the community together. It's not meant to cause harm to any member of our community. So I think this is, it is time. We've established that the event is a great event, and we've seen the benefits having it here and in South Mountain at the Rick Covier Park. And I know there's a push by the Morwood RA to better utilize the park in Morwood. And Ms. Meerberg's talked about the Cheshwell Park. And you mentioned the Hallville Park. So we have parks to highlight. And I think this is going to be a great thing. And really have an opportunity to show off our parks and all the efforts from Ms. Meerberg and her crew to ensure that the parks are as wonderful as they are. So that's my thought on that. I'm able to change my mind. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. To the Cheshwell Waterfront Gazebo, sandblasting and powder coating. That's moved by Councillor Annable and Councillor Uhrig. Be it resolved that council approve budget amendment number 2025-09 to proceed with the sandblasting and powder coating of the Cheshwell Waterfront Gazebo at a cost of $13,500. Ms. Meerberg.
So staff are recommending that council approve this budget amendment request. The work includes sandblasting and powder coating to restore the deteriorating paint finish. While this project was removed during the 2025 budget deliberations due to funding pressures, which we all understand, the Chesterville Rotary Club has kindly committed to fully covering the costs through a donation. The township will oversee the project and expenses, of course, and be reimbursed by the Rotary, resulting in no net impact to the municipal budget. This partnership enables the project to be completed this year and preserves the aesthetic appeal of the waterfront. So I would just like to thank the Chesterville Rotary Club for coming forward and partnering on this fantastic project.
Yes, thanks to the Chesterville Rotary Club for stepping up. Questions, comments? I did have an opportunity at the Meet Me on Main Street on King Street in Chesterville to speak to the president and some members of the Chesterville Rotary Club about this challenge. And they did mention that they're having a good conversation with you, Ms. Meerberg, about the process and getting to there. And I said, I'm sure it's going to work out the way you want. And lo and behold, here we are. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. And Environmental Services, Ms. Ward, Director Ward, and Jean-Michael Stevens? Jean-Michael?
Stevens, yeah.
Thank you. So we have a KIR long-term financial study report. I'm not sure if how you're going to manage
we'll
that.
Come up to the middle, maybe.
So Ms. Ward and Jean-Michael are going to deliver and answer questions about the long-term financial study and water and wastewater rate review. Close enough to the microphone? I just want to make sure you're close enough, that's all, John Michael. Thank you.
Just a little bit further in terms of way of background, part of the initiative was that some of the significant work sessions that the council and the associated water infrastructure requirements, most significantly on the water and wastewater side, So the base growth scenario that we looked at was based on the United Counties, the Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry's growth management strategy that have been prepared and projects growth across the area municipalities. And over the 10-year period, that would encompass about 67 new residential units per year. We also looked at a slower growth scenario that would have slower growth in the near term in response to some of the downturns in the housing activity in response to the global economic environment we're in. And so that would be about 52 units per year over the 10-year period. Then we also looked at some other alternatives in terms of options that could impact how these services are ultimately funded. So one was looking at an alternative water and wastewater rate structure. So by way of review, your current water and wastewater rates are imposed with a monthly base charge and then a charge per cubic meter of water that is consumed that is uniform for all water consumption. What we looked at is what we'd call an increasing block rate, where higher volume water consumers would pay a higher consumptive rate over a certain threshold. Then we also wanted to look at what would the impacts be of expansions in water usage from your larger water users like Lactalis, where if they did consume upwards of 50% of future available water capacity, what impacts would that have on growth and the funding of infrastructure? And so with a large water user like that consuming that amount of water would limit the amount of urban residential growth that could occur within the available capacity on the water system, and would limit that to about 40 units per year versus about 62 units per year in the urban area. So it's a bit difficult to see on the screen, but I just wanted to highlight where some of the key sort of inputs, interactions in the long-term financial plan and rate study. And so what's highlighted here is on the upper left-hand side is the anticipated development within the township. And from that anticipated development on the top left in the orange boxes, we know there's going to be revenue impacts, whether that's additional assessment growth that would pay taxes, additional water and wastewater connections that would pay those user rates, and other non-tax user rates as well. That growth in the municipality is also going to have impacts on your programming related operating costs, but as well it's going to impact the required infrastructure, and that new infrastructure is going to impact your infrastructure related operating costs in the green boxes. And with those future infrastructure expansions, we need to look at how those ultimately will be funded, what those financial arrangements will be, whether it be funded through development charges, your municipal act connection charges, debt, for example. And ultimately on the right-hand side, we wanted to bring that all together, understand with those forecast expenditures and revenues, what will be the impact on your municipal tax rates and water and wastewater user rates. The other thing I wanted to highlight initially, because I think it's really important to keep in mind as we go throughout the discussion on the long-term financial plan, is the approach around setting taxes and tax rates and water and wastewater rates. And so ultimately to have those rates at a sort of a long-term sustainable level to meet your operating and life cycle costs of your infrastructure, we want to make sure that the revenue that's being generated from those rates is sufficient to fund not only your operating costs, but those long-term average annual capital needs. And so what's illustrated on the slide here is on the top, the two different graphs here. On the top one is focusing on if we have our average annual life cycle costs in green, and then the dotted orange line would be over a 10-year forecast period, what are your actual capital needs? In this example, your actual capital needs are lower than your long-term life cycle costs, which, if you think about a simple example, that might commonly happen where you have a facility that has a certain amount of investments can require annual on average over its life cycle. In some years, in some 10-year periods, you may have a roof that needs to be completely replaced, and those average annual needs would be greater than the long-term average. And in some periods, there's only going to be minor repairs and refurbishments that are required, and those long-term needs or those 10-year needs are going to be less than what that long-term average would be. But in the blue line, what we're focusing on here is ultimately what you want to do is be transitioning to a level where you're funding at that long-term average annual need in terms of those capital costs. And so where your long-term needs are greater than your forecast needs over a 10-year period, as is illustrated in the top chart, you're going to be in a situation where you're fully funding those forecast needs, but also contributing to reserves for the future needs that are going to come at a later time. And then that's represented in the bottom chart, where in this time period, your actual capital needs are greater than that average annual life cycle cost, as we can see indicated by the hashed orange line being greater than the life cycle cost in green. But you're still looking to increase your funding to that long-term life cycle level. And as your actual capital needs are greater than that in this time period, then you're going to be drawing down those reserves that you've contributed to, or in some cases having to issue external debt as well. So to look at some of the key inputs and the initial findings, in terms of the anticipated development, as I mentioned, being premised on the Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry growth management strategy. When we looked at the anticipated development and applied typical property assessment values to that have been seen in the township, the total weighted assessment of the property assessment in the township would increase by between about 1 and 1.7% annually over that forecast period. And in terms of the additional water and wastewater connections, we'd see about 556 new connections, or 558, I should say, new connections over that period. And having a much greater, and when we look at the total water and wastewater consumption or wastewater flows, we can see that obviously on the water side. By 2034, we'd have about 1 million cubic meters of water consumption. On the wastewater side, only about 471,000 cubic meters of water consumption from customers that are on the wastewater system, because largely of lactalis, not the water that they consume and take from the system isn't contributed back into the sewer. Moving on to the capital and operating costs, the key sources that are listed here, I won't dwell on them in too much detail, but it does utilize the latest information that the township has available in terms of the anticipated water and wastewater expansions, as well as the long-term capital costs for other tax-supported services. Over the forecast period, that 10-year period, is anticipated to be about $128 million in total capital needs. 52 million of that is related to growth-related expenses to continue to provide services to new development, and the majority of that, about $44 million, is related to water and wastewater infrastructure expansions. I'd also note that of the $128 million, more than half of that, about 54% of the total costs, are related to tax-supported services versus the water and wastewater infrastructure. So this slide is in presenting the anticipated capital funding sources of that $120 million. We can see that's broken down by the tax, water, and wastewater supported services, so almost $70 million in tax supported costs, $33 million for water, and about $25 million for wastewater. When we look at the funding sources, of the $52 million in growth-related costs that were identified on the previous slide, about $27 million of that would be funded through external debt, the majority of that being on the water and wastewater side. And then we can see on the tax-supported side about $35 million in new non-growth related debt to support the long-term capital needs, or the 10-year capital needs in that regard. And so going back to that illustration of the two charts and the funding plan, the way this funding plan has been developed is within the proposed tax and water rate increases to reach that long-term sustainable funding level. So the order of priorities is first you fund your operating costs, then you have remaining funds available to meet your capital needs. And so where reserves are sufficient to fund the forecast capital needs from reserves. That would be the priority. If there's any grants available, such as the Housing Enabling Water System funds, those would be allocated as well. And then in any years where there are not sufficient reserves available to meet those capital needs, that's where then we're modeling into additional debt that would be required to fund those capital costs. I would also note here that the note about the $4.1 million interim borrowing, that's just to recognize that because of the front-ended nature of the wastewater infrastructure having to be built in advance of development occurring, that there would be draws on the rate-supported reserves to fund those needs, which would be ultimately repaid from your connection charges that are paid by new development once that development does occur. The bottom chart then is just to highlight in terms of the general capital reserves, so not your water, not your connection charges or development charge reserve funds, but your other tax and rate-supported reserves. Those balances would generally remain relatively unchanged over the forecast period, where across all three areas about $6.7 million currently. By 2034, you'd be at about $6.9 million. We do see a shift between tax and water and wastewater in terms of the tax-based reserves largely being utilized as you would expect with significant tax-based debt that would be required. In terms of the operating costs, we did look at in detail at the township's operating budgets across all services, looked at those costs in terms of how they would be impacted by growth in population in terms of impacts on programs and services, as well as areas that would be impacted not by growth in population, but by new infrastructure in terms of the portions of your operating budget that are related to operating and maintaining that infrastructure. And as well as with respect to the water and wastewater infrastructure that's anticipated, township staff was able to provide specific estimates in terms of the operating costs of the new infrastructure that would be anticipated. And so over the 2025 to 2034 period, including 3% annual inflationary increases, we can see that the operating costs would increase between about 3.1 and 3.9% per year. A little bit higher on the wastewater side because of the operating costs of that new infrastructure, but the majority of the increases are inflationary in nature. So on the tax-based side, increasing from 12.9 to $17.6 million in annual operating costs. On the water system, from 1.1 to $1.5 million over that period annually, and on wastewater, from about $800,000 to about $1.2 million annually over that period. Again, that does include 3% annual inflation as well. So in terms of the rate forecast, I touched, I think, on this point as well earlier in terms of the rates being forecast to fund those annual operating costs, as well as transitioning up to the annual life cycle requirements by 2034. And because of the sort of significant impact that those life cycle targets have in where you would be transitioning your tax and water and wastewater rates to, those inputs then are quite important. So the life cycle costs, which are informed by the township's asset management plan, I'd note that asset management plan does need to be updated to meet legislative requirements. And so depending on what those updates reveal in terms of those long-term life cycle targets, that could impact what the long-term projections are around the rates. And one of the key things to keep in mind is that as part of that asset management plan update, one of the things that's required is for council to set direction on approved levels of service. And so in setting those levels of service, you'll be able to make those decisions around what levels of service do you want to have and what are the financial implications of different levels of service decisions that you would want to make. And so currently, the average annual life cycle costs that are being utilized are about $6.3 million for tax-based services, $1.6 million for water, and $1.4 million for wastewater. Those are by 2034 and would include inflation. So those are at 2034 what those targets would be. So this chart then sort of brings together the total capital and operating funding plan to meet those long-term operating and capital costs. And so the black line here is the projected operating and long-term life cycle costs that would need to be funded to be meeting those long-term needs and be at a sustainable level. As you can see on the left-hand side, there is a gap between the stacked area portion of where we can see the top red portion is of that chart, which is at about $14 million versus the $17.5 million, which is the total of the operating costs and life cycle costs on the tax system. So about $3.5 million is currently what you'd consider your asset management plan funding gap that exists right now. And so over the forecast period, with growth in assessment and increases in taxes, there'd be additional revenue generated. And with that additional revenue, you continue to fund the operating costs, which are shown in the light gray section of the chart, where then we can see in the dark green, which is transfers to reserves for capital purposes, the dark blue, which is new debt payments, and the red, which is existing debt payments that we can see would be retired over that period. The capital funding component would be increased to close that asset management plan gap, being at that sustainable level by 2034. And that would require about 5.3% average annual tax rate increases over that period. Again, that's inclusive of inflationary increases to both your operating and capital costs. On the water side, similar illustration. We can see that currently there'd be about a $300,000 asset management gap there between about $1.7 million of the current funding capacity and the $2 million annual target. Over that period, we can see that with the increases in transfers to reserves, you would fund those operating costs and close that funding gap. And that would require between 7.6 and 11.3% average annual increases to the average annual residential water bill. And then lastly, on the wastewater side, the current rates out for wastewater are fairly close to that current funding level, with about a $50,000 asset management plan gap currently. We can see that a bit of that dog leg in the target for the life cycle and capital costs. That's because with the additional wastewater infrastructure being constructed, that then increases what that long-term life cycle funding target would be as you add additional infrastructure that does need to be maintained and replaced over its life cycle. And so with wastewater, on the wastewater system, the average residential bill would increase between about 3.9 and 4.7% over that 10-year period. Just note on the last two charts, as you'll see, there is no additional debt payments being shown here because this excludes debt payments that would be funded through future connection charges. So when we look back earlier at the capital funding plan, there was additional water and wastewater debt that was anticipated. That's for growth-related needs that would have a dedicated funding source through future connection charges that would not be funded by the water and wastewater rates. So with the additional $63 million in debt that is currently encompassed in this plan over the next 10-year period, it's important then to also make sure we're considering what impact does that have around your legislated ability to actually borrow that amount over that period. And so legislatively, municipalities are limited to annual financing costs, your annual principal and interest costs related to your outstanding debt of no more than 25% of your own source revenues. Currently, your existing debt payments represent less than 2% of your own source revenues, so well below that threshold. With the additional $67 million in new debt, that would increase that metric to 12.35% of your own source revenues by 2034, so just around half of that legislated annual repayment limit. And so a fair bit of detail on this slide. I thought it was helpful to, in your package to include this. And so what we've presented here is that for the average annual residential home with a property assessment of just under $350,000 and average annual water consumption of 132 cubic meters per year. What the change would be in the overall water, wastewater, and tax bill to that average household. And so this is shown in detail here, including the forecasted monthly water base charge, the volumetric charge in terms of the rate, and the annual charge for the base charge and volumetric charge. Similarly on the wastewater side, and then as well the annual tax bill for that sample property. On the bottom portion of the chart, it shows what those increases be across the three components of the bill, both from a water, wastewater, and tax side, and as on a percentage basis, as well as on an increase in the actual amount of the typical bill per year. And so for someone in one of the urban serviced areas who has water and wastewater, over that 10-year period, to be an average annual increase to their total water wastewater tax bill of about $200 per year, which is about a 5.5% average annual increase over that period. Of that $200 per year increase, about 2/3 of that is related to the tax supported system. So about $132 per year of that $200 increase is actually related to increasing funding for your asset management plan needs of your tax supported services. About $68 is related to the increase in the water and wastewater bills. This chart then, just from a water and wastewater comparison standpoint, for your average household consuming 132 cubic meters of water, we can see where you compare next to other municipalities in the United Counties as well as the surrounding geographic area. Your current rates as well as the proposed rates in 2026 would remain the lowest in the United Counties, below the other 5 municipalities, and with that increase move slightly above Brockville, but still be positioned at the sort of lower middle portion of the comparison. So in terms of the scenario analysis, we looked at the lower growth, so about a 15% decrease in total residential growth. If there were no changes to the water and wastewater infrastructure expansion, so if you still plan to go ahead with that, the infrastructure for new development, and then there was a slowdown, what that's going to result in is lower connection charge revenue with the lower rates of new development. You'd also have lower tax and rate revenue on an ongoing basis as you have less new households within the township, so less tax and rate revenue available to fund ongoing operating and debt financing costs. And so with that lower level of development, that would see about $6 million in additional long-term debt versus the base scenario, and that would increase your utilization of your annual repayment limit to about 13.6% of own source revenues versus about 12.3% of the base scenario, and it would also have a greater draw on your reserves with about $2.8 million lower general capital reserve balance at 2034. So as you'd expect, lower growth with the same expansions are going to have a downward pressure on your funding sources. So then looking at a couple options for council to consider. The first that we discussed with staff was around an alternative water and wastewater rate structure to incentivize water conservation, but also to generate greater revenues from your larger water users. And so, as I touched on earlier, currently water and wastewater rates are imposed with this base charge as well as a rate per cubic meter of water consumption that's uniform across all water that's consumed. The wastewater rates are imposed as a percentage of the water bill, but you could think of them in the same fashion in terms of there's a base component to that and a volumetric component. For the scenarios, we have forecasted water and wastewater rates separately though, so that you would have a separate wastewater rate. It would no longer be a percentage of the water bill, which we find is helpful in terms of making sure those systems are sustainable independently. As a result, the wastewater system is much closer to a full cost recovery level currently than the water system is. And so in terms of the alternative rate structure that we talked about, it would look at having what we'd call an increasing block rate, where all water that's consumed up to 300 cubic meters per year per connection would be charged at one rate, and then any water consumption above 300 cubic meters per year would be charged at a higher rate. We've initially set that threshold at 300 cubic meters per year. Given your average residential consumption is 132 cubic meters per year, and through our experience doing this work across the province, the vast majority of homes would be consuming well under 300 cubic meters per year. We set that threshold to try and make sure that we are capturing all residential homes in the lower, in the first block of the alternative rate structure. And so of the total connections in the township, only about 9% would consume water above 300 cubic meters per year, but 175 connections. But of those 175 connections, they're actually consuming almost 3/4 of the water. So about 73% of all water consumption is above that 300 cubic meter per year threshold. And so with that scenario and generating greater levels of revenue from the larger water consumers, what that would mean is that in comparison to your current rates, you would still have an increase in the monthly base rate that was forecast with the base scenario, but the consumptive rate would remain unchanged for water consumption under 300 cubic meters per year. And then we looked at transitioning in the increase above 300 cubic meters per year, so it wasn't felt all in 1 year, by 5% per year between 2026 to 2029. So ultimately, there'd be a 20% premium on the water consumed above 300 cubic meters. On wastewater, same structure, but there would be a slight increase in the rate for consumption below 300 cubic meters, just 1% per year, to make sure that we're generating the revenue required to fund the long-term needs. So in the following slides, we just wanted to highlight what those impacts are for different customer types within the township. So for your average residential household, they would see a decrease in what they would pay in comparison to the base scenario. So we can see their average bill being about $910 currently. Under the base forecast, that would have increased to $1,585 per year. That would be about $47 lower, $1,538 per year under the alternative scenario because of the additional revenue generated from the larger consumers. So then what that means is that those connections consuming greater than 300 cubic meters per year are going to see an increase in their bill in comparison to the base forecast. So here we've looked at a non-residential customer consuming 1,000 cubic meters per year. Typical properties consume between about 1,000 and 2,000 cubic meters per year, include restaurants, community centers, and schools. That total annual bill would increase to about $6,450, but $216 greater than what was anticipated under the base forecast. When looking at a larger connection consuming 100,000 cubic meters per year, so this would include some sample properties like the Dundas Manor and Hospital that consume in and around that range. We can say if you're consuming 100,000 cubic meters per year, this would actually result in the total annual bill increasing by about $46,000 versus the base forecast. And then lastly, if we're looking at just the water bill for a connection consuming 500,000 cubic meters per year, this would result in about a $50,000 increase in the annual water bill from about $800,000 to about $850,000 per year. You can see that that's at 2034 because the rates were developed to have that increase more significantly in the first 5 years, getting to that 20% threshold. There'd obviously be a much greater gap between the base and alternative scenario at 2029 when that's phased in, and then that gap would continue to close over the forecast period. So the other option that we wanted to talk about was if there was a significant approval for additional available water capacity for Lactalis in terms of an expansion within its current operations. As I mentioned earlier, the utilization of the future capacity would be created. With that expansion would limit what's available for residential growth within that same infrastructure, so to about 40 units per year in the urban area versus 62 units per year in the base forecast. On the water side, what that impact would have is that with that, while that limits urban residential growth, that would actually result in an increase in overall water consumption on the system. And because there would be revenue associated with that additional water consumption, that would actually decrease or that would increase revenues and decrease the average annual residential water bill by about 10% per year by 2034 because of some of the economies of scale that would exist with that additional water consumption and the revenue that would be generated in that regard. Conversely, on the wastewater side, because that additional, because of limiting that residential growth, as a result of the usage of the water capacity and the absence of Lactalis paying wastewater rates and generating wastewater revenue in that regard, that would actually increase forecast residential water bills by about 7% versus the base scenario of about $61 per year. So almost offsetting the benefits and economies of scale on the water side. And then more significantly on the tax side, again, because of the constrained residential growth combined with the absence of additional taxation revenue associated with that expansion on the Lactalis side, that would increase forecast residential tax bills by about 3% per year by 2034, or almost $90 per year. So overall, in terms of the impacts on the average residential home, it would increase the average annual bills across water, wastewater, and taxation. So just to wrap up some of the salient points in terms of the observations from the long-term financial plan. So as we've noted, there's some significant capital infrastructure expansions requiring investments in that infrastructure and anticipated about $63 million in external debt funding. And especially that debt funding in the absence of other funding sources, whether that's additional grants that might come available or front-ended developer financing if there was the ability to enter into negotiations with developers around assisting in the financing of the required works. As noted, if growth doesn't materialize as planned for the infrastructure that you are proceeding with, then there will be pressures on your funding sources on an interim base, and so that might require either additional debt or the utilization of existing reserves that might impact your ability to rehabilitate and replace infrastructure and continue to provide services at desired service levels. And then, as I just noted on the previous slide, approving additional water usage from large volume customers that aren't also utilizing the wastewater system as it can constrain the residential growth due to the available capacity on the water system. And it's going to result in some stranded capacity on the wastewater side that can't be utilized and might require additional investments in expansionary water infrastructure, such as, for example, water supply from South Dundas to continue to allow further residential growth to occur. Have the overbuilt wastewater capacity in the absence of further water capacity being created to allow further residential growth to occur, and as I mentioned, the lower property assessment growth and tax funding impacts that would occur. So I know there's a lot there, so happy to take any questions and try and clarify or expand on any of those items further.
Well, thank you, Jean-Michel. Michael, I'm sure there's lots of questions. If we could somewhat limit questions to clarity, because I think there's a lot to digest going forward and scenarios to be discussed with Danielle. And I do appreciate that thoughts need to be exchanged, but questions of clarity, do we have any? Not on clarity? So I'm suggesting, I did have some notes about the increases to the water and wastewater. Are those similar rate increases that other municipalities of our size would suffer?
Yeah, they're certainly not unusual. We've seen municipalities with greater rate increases than that. There's a number of different factors that are impacting the rate increases in any municipality, and so it's where are you currently in terms of that asset management gap, and so depending on where you are in that asset management plan funding journey, that's going to impact the rate increases that a municipality might see, as well the growth that you're anticipating in the municipality, and any of the economies of scale in terms of operating that infrastructure in the future is another significant factor in the rate increases that a municipality might be expecting.
And I think the reason, I know the reason why I asked that question is to look at what South Glengarry's the wastewater and water rate is substantially higher than what our rates are. Would that be because of the asset management and or their challenges with asset management? Is that why there would be such a discrepancy between their rate and our rate?
Daniel might have some other observations on that. That would be one of them. One of them can be municipalities, depending on the types of systems they're operating, smaller systems, and especially on the wastewater side, certain types of infrastructure can have vastly different operating costs in terms of the type of system that they're operating. So municipalities with multiple smaller systems don't have those same economies of scale as other municipalities.
So I guess that this boils down to the uniqueness of each system, each operating system that determines the level of rate, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, and as I said, for clarity, but I do want to allow the deputy mayor.
You just made me think of something. I just have one question. So basically, you're saying that for the industrial rate, let's say over 300, it's only going to increase by 20% over 4 years. Okay, so my question, that doesn't sound like very much increase to me for industrial water usage. Do other municipalities, like, is that an average for industrial rates, or do other municipalities have a much higher difference between residential and industrial rate?
The predominant rate structures would be to not have an increase for larger volume users. So most municipalities do not increase the rate for industrial users. They have a rate structure similar to the one you have currently.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to stymie anyone's questions, thoughts, but it is, Jean-Michel, it's a lot of information provided and a lot to digest. But I do appreciate the insights you provided, and your work with Ms. Ward has been exceptional. That's a lot of information to compile and present to us. And I look at Ms. Ward. There's going to be a lot of questions asked from council about scenarios and options. But I do think of, and I think I'll talk about that later about some of the challenges that. Not challenges, but some of the inroads we're trying to make on support, and I think that might change the whole matrix of numbers. So, if there's nothing else, thank you for that presentation. It's appreciated, all the information you provided to us and to the public. Thank you very much. Oh, and we're going to move, unless you have anything to add, Ms. Ward. You sure? And now there's another KIR that our Madam CAO is going to present on optimization of capital revenue sources in water and wastewater.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. In conjunction with annual rate review and long-term financial with Watson and Associates, administration has reviewed high water usage trends since 2019. and the model of system allocations assigned to properties to guide future growth and capital contributions. So while this model works well for residential development, it falls short for industrial, institutional, and commercial users. The sharp increase in unit pricing in 2024 that you'll note is driven by the Wellfield 8 project, which primarily highlighted the need for a review of our existing model to ensure it remains fair and sustainable. With that, I'll pass it on to Director Ward to go over the highlights and proposed recommendations in terms of next steps.
Thank you, CAO. So as council is aware, the allocation process started in 2019 where we started allocating water capacity as we had dwindling resources. And the whole idea behind allocating that water was to ensure that we had enough units to sustain growth until we were able to expand our water capacity further. And while that system, as the CAO alluded to, was key to ensuring our existing sustainability in terms of water resources, it didn't necessarily look at the financial impacts that could come from allocating specific units. And when I talk about that, I want to be clear that it works in a sense for residential because most residential water use, as you already heard from Sean Michael, is very consistent. It's usually under 300 cubic meters, and it's easy for us to financially forecast. However, when you get into institutional, commercial, and industrial, you could have uses change their flow requirements in a day. A lot of times expansions happen within footprints that don't require a building permit or they don't require expansion of that footprint outside of what they currently have. So what that means is our allocation process is tied to a building permit right now. So if someone needs further water, they apply for a building permit, they get water allocation. But if you're not applying for a building permit and you're increasing production or you're increasing usage because you have more students or you have more residents or you have more uses in your facility that didn't necessarily are tied to a building permit, those are allocations that are not actually being allocated. They're just being given. So when we looked at optimizing the way that we could create revenue sources, when we looked at the long-term financial plan and the water and wastewater rates, this is one of the areas that came up to us as an area where we could definitely improve. As council is aware, we do have some users that, they are using quite a bit more water than what we originally gave them in 2019. And because of the way the allocation process is structured, we missed out on that opportunity as illustrated in the chart there for council to review. What we'd like to do moving forward is work on an allocation model that considers a few other uses. So while we keep the allocation model consistent for maybe residential uses, we look at allocation being a little bit different for institutional, commercial, and industrial users. And that's where we're looking for feedback from council tonight, is looking at what that could possibly be. So we could look at service agreements with all of our IC&I customers. Again, IC&I is industrial, commercial, institutional, just for councils, if I'm using some lingo there. Special capital levies, as Sean Michael already alluded to, we talked about looking at block rate increases, or we could potentially also add a capital levy. Some municipalities have capital levies applied to their water usage, so they automatically pay a capital levy on each cubic meter they use over a certain amount. And that goes towards a capital fund, which then stimulates growth. So it funds that further development of future resources of water. There's the billing back of capital charges associated with increased usage that has happened. That's an option as well. And then the other one we'd like to consider throwing out there for council is flow monitoring and control of that flow. So right now we don't have that ability through our bylaw to kind of constrict flow based on a certain amount because we don't have service use agreements with any of our large consumers. So those service use agreements are key in trying to figure out how you'd like to restrict flow so that they can't just keep taking more water and not pay for that capital need that's required to then find more water resources. So again, we're just looking for a little bit of feedback on how council would like administration to approach this, or if you'd like to think about it and touch base with the CAO and myself, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions. But if there's any feedback tonight or any questions about this, I'd be more than happy to answer it.
Thank you, Ms. Ward, for that. Any feedback on that, Councilor Uhrig?
I just, I know we've had the package for a little bit and we've had a chance to review and everything, but this is a lot to digest, as you mentioned to the previous presentation, Mr. Mayor. And in terms of this one, I think it's just, I think my biggest feedback at this stage in terms of what we've been presented tonight is just, it's nice to see something beyond the status quo. That we're being presented options and we're being presented scenarios and things to, consider and move forward because, historically this municipality has just pushed forward with these things and just thrown it back onto the users through rate increases. I mean, this council did the same for other projects. But now that we've kind of reached critical mass, so to speak, it's nice to see these other options. And I do think there is significant room for conversation from this council through you, Director Ward, to you, CAO, and to just how we move forward. But I think more than anything, I do appreciate seeing these options and things to consider as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great idea, and I'm saying that because, for instance, in 2024, if a house is hooking up to the water system, they have to pay up front $17,000 just to get the 1 unit per year. Okay, and that's just a one-time thing for year after year. So here you have Lactalis, who in 2024 doesn't need a permit, and all of a sudden they increase their use by 50 units. Well, that 50 units cost us a lot of capital investment to get that 50 units. And so I totally agree that they should pay the 17,000 as if it was 50 houses hooking up. You just can't have an industry at its own whim decide we need more water and only pay the water rate and not pay for the capital that it took to get that water. And so I totally agree with this system. Thank you.
Dave, your thoughts? Any other thoughts?
It's a lot of stuff to take in.
Councillor Lennox.
Yeah, definitely a lot to take in here. Nice seeing the numbers. Thank you. I agree with Councillor Uhrig and Deputy Mayor Bergeron that it's really nice having options. Let's say hypothetically next council you brought flow rate metering policies and et cetera to us. How long would it take to implement something like that?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor, it depends on how council would proceed through that. Ideally, we would look at the options at the next council meeting, then we would come to council in the following meeting with a bylaw to then institute those changes if that's what council chooses to do. And then following that, we would obviously have an action period where we would have to work through the capital. So for example, a flow meter would require capital investment. And at that point, council will have to decide whether that's the township's investment or if that's a private party's investment. But those are all things that we would have to lay out for council in the next meeting. If that's something you'd like to consider, we'd come back with costs and implications and then decisions that council would have to make that would then be in the bylaw at the following meeting.
Right. No, perfect. Great answer. Yeah, that's the big thing to consider in my mind. I do like the flow rate monitoring because should there be a big fire and you have to redirect, or Henderson Drain is getting water pumped through a two-directional drill or whatever else, we have to be able to control when we're at peak usage. And in droughts like this, we have, I like the idea of giving Aqua the control. Slide 28 of the presentation, I really liked the point where it said if we don't grow and we continue on this model, pretty much it's saying your tax bill is going to increase if you don't do something with the industrial size users right now. Do we compare the hospital to Lactalis? No, they're not really comparable. Do we hit Lactalis with the full Monty? No, that's not fair. I liked the CAO's mention that something sustainable but fair. Right now, I do think Lactalis could be a little more fair in what they're paying, going to the usage of 50 units or the example of 50 units, just like that, where if we put up a few new houses for our future generation of North Dundas people, That's long-term taxation right there. That helps everybody's taxes in the grand scheme. But anyways, those are my thoughts, and I hope to see some interesting figures going forward.
Thank you. So to wrap that up, yeah, there's things to consider, discussions to be had in the office with you, and then I think at the next council meeting you can present some details. And then, as you say, it is somewhat time sensitive, but it's not a need to do right now. We can do discussions at the next meeting, and then consideration following that meeting, at a meeting after that. Yeah, there are options that I look at too, and we really have to have an understanding of the challenge. It's a perfect, excuse me, it's an imperfect storm with the drought that we're suffering right now and the challenges that we face with water in the community. These concerns are there, and the consumption of water is highlighted right now. And water is vitally important to all of us, so we need to make sure that we go down this path that's not going to jeopardize future councils, and future growth, and that. And so, yeah, consideration needs to be done. Lots of discussion needs to be had. I say that all the time, that we really have to be very aware of where we stand and why we stand where we do. So, saying that. Thank you. Moving to the consent agenda. And that's moved by Councillor Uhrig and seconded by Councillor Lennox. That all items listed under the consent agenda be approved, filed as recommended. All those in favor? In favor and not in favor. I can't remember what I say. But anyway, none. Saying that, it's carried. Maybe it's because I don't have my glasses on. Items for consideration, unfinished business. Any update at all on the budget amendment for Joel Steele, the sound systems? Madam Ms. Meerberg.
Yes. I am waiting. I was in touch with Octasound last week and just waiting on an up-to-date quote for the Chesterville Arena.
Thank you. Director Paul, zoning amendment 10641 Main Street, South Mount.
Yeah, we received a draft record of site condition. It hasn't been filed yet, but we received the draft to review, and we're going through that right now.
Thank you. Notices of motions, none. Boards and committees. I have a note here that's going to be a slide shown on the screen, and the Deputy Mayor would speak to that.
I usually have to give a short summary of what happened at county meeting.
You can do that right after.
Oh, sorry. Right after? Sorry. I thought that was part of it. Part of the package at the county meeting was the SDG going and approaching the government about the Blue Box program, how they wanted to include institutions, schools, industrial, commercial to pick up, and which I'm glad we're doing, because we really need to push for that. We can't have some people being picked up and others not. But in that, they gave is it there? No. Do you have the slide? It's the contact phone number and email for anyone in the community that has an issues with their Blue Box pickup. We're not responsible for that anymore. It has been on the township website, but just to remind everybody, there's the email there and there's a phone number, and that's who you call. And on that subject about the Blue Box, I just read on my phone this morning that the 2 school boards in Ottawa have taken out all the Blue Boxes out of their schools and have told staff and the students that they must come to school recycling free. Anything that they use, they have to put back in their bag and bring home, and put all the recyclables back in their household recyclables. None will be taken at the school. So, I mean, this is the ridiculous situation that happens whenever you have the province have a bright idea of how they're going to recycle recyclables.
Thank you. And I'll just weigh in a little bit on county council. We had the elections were held for the next warden, and Mayor Broad, Councillor Broad from, and I say councillor because on county council, Mayor Broad is Councillor Broad. Councillor Broad put his name forward to vie for the spot, the position of warden, as did Councillor Francois Landry. The mayor and congratulations go out to Francois Landry, and thanks go to Jason, Councillor Broad for his commitment to trying. But Francois Landry will be the next warden for the United Counties of SDG. Congratulations to him. There was there was staff appreciation, acknowledgement day, years of services awards were handed out. It was good to see that. I do want to lightly touch on a county council, I guess, item. SDG ball tournament was just held, and so I'm going to speak to that. A team from North Dundas was playing and played well, not well enough, but we played well. And whenever I say we played well, I had the unfortunate chance to play. I haven't played in more than a dozen years, and I think I showed that on the field. And we had two injuries in the first game, and so I think that was probably why we got sidelined. Yes. Yes, two of the better players. Our director of environment thought she was a goaltender and blocked a line drive with her knee, and I think it put herself out of the game and out of the rest of the tournament. And I wish her well in her recovery. And then I received a notice in the morning of the tournament that I had a chance to play, or need an extra breathing body out there. So I had my daughter's glove on and shoes that were more than 20 years old, and the sole came off the shoe when I hit a single that turned into a triple, but I had half a shoe going around the bases. But before that, I caught a ball with the palm of my hand. It missed my glove totally and it hit me in the hand. So with 2 injuries were sustained. But it was a lot of fun, and kudos go to Lisa Devereaux for organizing our team and being part of that organizing committee. It was a wonderful day. Madam CAO was there, the clerk was there. I'm not sure, was any other staff members there to watch the fiasco, the game? No. Oh, yes, Todd was there. He had determined he wasn't going to injure himself any longer, so he decided not to play this year. But it was a good event. It brought the lower tiers together and to compete against the stacked SDG team, and being stacked, I think that's why they won. So congratulations to SDG for that. But I look forward to next year's tournament and the recovery of our director and someone to replace me. But besides that, I don't think there's too much I want to go on about. The Parade of Lights, I have nothing. Garden Party Market, there is one coming up November 22nd, I do believe it is. November 22nd, there will be a Garden Party Market. It'll be the Christmas market. It was a great success last year, and I'm sure it'll be the same this year. Anything from Art in the Waterfront?
No,
Or
they're
the-
dormant at the moment.
Historical Society?
They don't meet, I believe, until next week.
I do have a comment about the Historical Society. It's been brought to my attention that there's a historic walk taking place. Oh, goodness gracious. And it's in October, so there'll be a further update on the historic walk that's going to take place in Chesterville, and it's going to talk about essentially how Chesterville came to be. And I think I have a part to play in that. Green Action Gang, Councillor? Dairy Fest, Deputy Mayor, anything at all?
Yes, I have. I wrote to Marsha Workman, who was the chair, and asked her to give a summary of how it went. I'm going to actually read what she wrote because there's something pretty important at the bottom. There was over 35 people participating in the Dairy Dash that raised $750 for community food share. Lots of vendors stated they had a good sales day. There were so many kids events that were free: mini Maestro's picnic, Hey Buster, puppet show, Tribeca bouncy castles, Lego car races, Mario Kart car races, face painting with Wild Rooster, and Dreaming Hearts did over 100 canvas paintings with children that day. Tim Tigers won the Law Ball tournament for the second year in a row, and We didn't get a count of how many classic cars arrived, but we were able to use the overflow parking in the field to accommodate, so it must have been a good show. Fireman's breakfast was a hit, being upstairs away from the heat. Many people thanked us for moving it into the air conditioning as the heat was quite unbearable that day. The only issue was they had booked a swimming pool and there was a birthday party booked at the same time, which happened last year, and so the children couldn't use the pool. But this is the one that, kind of upset me a bit. Amy, Wendy, and I are not returning next year. We have had so many complaints leading up to, during, and after that it is not worth it. To be honest, Amy was in tears twice before 9 a.m. So people forget that we are volunteers. So this is a really sad situation, and that it's very hard to get volunteers today. And society has changed to the point where they complain, they're rude, and they really give you a hard time. And so if you're a volunteer, really, why do you want to expose yourself to this kind of behavior? And so right now, if Dairy Fest is to continue, we have to have people who will volunteer to chair and organize it. And so I'm putting it out there. She's already put it on Facebook. If anyone wants to volunteer for the position, they can contact me, or she has other contact information there. But I just thought I would mention that at our public meeting today.
That's unfortunate news. I really do appreciate all the work that Amy and Marcia, especially, Marcia and Amy put towards this, and the small group of volunteers that put that on, including Aaron Della, and their commitment to the community, and to have it suffer the slings and arrows of those that really don't do a whole lot to support activities in the community. It's a disappointing thing, though our volunteers are precious, and to have them suffer that type of abuse is unfortunate, and it's totally unfortunate. And my thoughts go out to Marcia and Amy, because they have committed so much for us, committed so much to support us and to ensure that we have another excellent event to participate in the summer, and to see that potentially go by the wayside. It's unfortunate, but maybe some of those people that had thoughts on how it should be run will step up and actually step up, and not just make comments, but those people step up and do something about it and put on a show as good as what's been delivered in the past. Yes. Thank you for bringing that forward, and then I'm going to. Yes, thank you. Anything from downtown Winchester?
Vince Sandbelt went and got a load of water in a big plastic container.
You have a
that was on-
microphone.
Vince Sandbelt went to his brother-in-law and got a big plastic container to pump water into from his farm, and that's what we're using to keep the plants alive on the corner.
Yes, and I think I heard something about that too. I was speaking to Vince about that, and there were negative comments about that, and a lot of. Yeah,
We've tried to make it as public as we could, but
Well, with concerning the water challenges and the drought that we have, but Vince had a connection outside of in North Dundas, and I think it's a small well or quarry that he was able to draw some water out of to look after the Sweet Corner Park, and some people took offense to that, and without asking the question of someone that was on site, how did they manage to get that to happen, and to thank them for their efforts, but nonetheless, there were no thanks delivered. It's just challenges. And then I think I need to go to Councilor Lennox with the Morwood RA.
No meetings over the summer, but they are a busy group. I believe you have a meeting with them next week. Yeah. So, yeah, bring your A game, because the Morwood RA are a sharp group.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Council comments. I think we've delivered some comments. Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I have one comment. I didn't bring anything to eat today because my 35-year-old oven died on Friday. I only noticed. I only noticed because I decided to bake bread that day, and it was half risen, and I thought, okay, now I have to warm up the oven, and I turned on the oven, and well, let's just say it's toast. And so until I get a new oven, and I'm sure it's not going to last 35 years like the last one, and it cost a hell of a lot more than the last one. Until then, you may not be getting snacks from me at meetings.
Okay, no gold star for you. So I do have some things besides someone's anti-compliances. Madam CAO and I had the opportunity recently to meet with the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. We had a meeting, it seems like so long ago, but it was only yesterday. We met Minister Trevor Jones and his PA and his John and Miriam. And met with the three of them. Well, the three of them met here, but the meeting was more about with the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. We met in my office for a little bit, and we had some discussions about the challenges that we spoke about today and other challenges that we face in the community. And he's a member of the legislature from Chatham, Kent. I do believe I'm correct to say that. So he is from an agriculture area. He gets ag. He understands ag. And he's quite impressed coming out to North Dundas to see our industry, agriculture. And some of the things we presented to him were questions that we suffer, and we still have two people from the ag community here with us today. Half load restrictions and the challenges that presents to us. And I use my story about, you imagine if you went to the major industry in Oshawa and told them that for 6 weeks of the year, you're going to run half loads and cut your production in half and your deliveries in half, and how that would go over. And he got my story. He understood the challenge that I talk about, half loads that we suffer in North Dundas. And especially, it was a fortuitous conversation whenever I talk about half loads, because the next stop on the tour, we went with the minister and John and Miriam, and we went to Savita, met with Savita, and we saw the new operation, or the rebuilding of their new operation, and it's soon to be fully commissioned. And it's quite amazing, the size of the Savita operation. And he was more than impressed with the operation. He met with two of the principals, the Hart brothers, Bob and Sandy. And at that time, there was a delegation of a sort from Japan. There was probably seven gentlemen from Japan that were talking about an investment that they're involved in a new business that's growing in Dundas County, which is going to supply food and food products around the world. And all processed from products from North Dundas, South Dundas, but that processing will take place in South Dundas. But nevertheless, as the former mayor would say, high tides raise all ships. And so it's a benefit to the ag community here. It was to me an exciting day, and I imagine it was for the Madam CAO to have an opportunity to have a fulsome discussion with the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness, which is so vital to what we do here in North Dundas. And he was very engaging, very supportive, and he took note of the things that we talked about, and he looks forward to bringing our concerns to the forefront and ensuring that our voices and our requests for funding they're understood. And I know he understands, being from an ag community, that he understands the challenge that we're facing and how vital it is whenever it's so plainly understood that the food that we process and produce here in North and South Dundas, North Dundas, feeds not just us, but not just Ontario and not just Canada. What we do here is vital. The community, what they do, the ag community, what they do is vital. And he's going to carry that message forward on our behalf, and to ensure that whenever we speak about the financial challenges we face and how the taxpayers in North Dundas support and subsidize the foodstuffs that end up on the table in Toronto, Hamilton, Vancouver, it's supported by the tax base here. And we need more support from the province to ensure that continues. So that was a good meeting. That was a great meeting. And then I think it was earlier in the week, or it was the last week, I lose track of time, when we were at AMO. Last week we were at AMO, thank you, with the deputy mayor was there, Madam CAO, and I was there, and we had a chance to meet with an MPP, the PA Rick Bresse from the Ministry of Transportation, the parliamentary assistant to the minister. Rick was there, and we spoke about the challenge of a local road, Liscombe Road, and we talked about, I always brag about how vital Liscombe Road is to the dairy industry of Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec and beyond, and with a major cheese manufacturer, the biggest in Canada, and everything that goes in or out goes out up and down Liscombe Road, so we had a fulsome discussion with the PA about that. I don't want to talk about any success there. I think there's some challenges to find the appropriate mechanism or via the appropriate program to support our challenges, but I think the conversation that we had yesterday was going to support that somewhat. At that AMO conference, Monday and Tuesday, we also met with the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Transportation, of Infrastructure, Amarjat Sandhu, and we spoke about the infrastructure challenges we face, which was the whole of the discussion that Watson Associates and our Director of Environment, Ms. Ward, presented to us today was the challenge of water, sewer, and the challenge that we face because of the costs of growth, the costs of capital and infrastructure. So we were able to deliver that message again, and we also touched on that yesterday with our Minister Jones. I had a chance to sit on two other delegations. I sat in on the Ministry of Children, Correctional Services, Ministry of Corrections, Children and Social Services. Yes, Ministry of Community, Children and Social Services. Thank you very much. And the PA for that, the parliamentary assistant in that portfolio, is local to us. Is George DeRuse. And so I had a chance to do the introductions there, and we spoke about the challenges that we face as a lower tier supporting the upper tier with funds that are needed for last resort services for those in dire need of being out of house or out of electricity or not having their water turned off. So we talked about those challenges faced by local residents and the need for support. And we're fortunate, I was fortunate to have Madam CEO sit in, and she was able to give an overview and a history of the challenges and how we got to this point and the downloads that take place from the province to us. And I think there's going to be better communication to deliver the message involving Madam CAO and PA DeRuse. He's new in that portfolio, and there's lots of experience lots of experience and knowledge he can be gained from speaking with our CAO, and that's going to continue. And then finally, the mayor of North Glengarry and myself and the warden of SDG, Madam CAO from the counties. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. And Mayor Broad. We sat in and we had a delegation to talk about the challenges of Dundas Manor and Maxwell Manor. And the funding challenges and the challenges, in my mind, presented by the ministry, especially to Dundas Manor for over the years, the number of years we waited for the application to be approved. And some of you may remember in March of one year of 2020, right here, we had a meeting right here, and Minister Marilee Fuller, she was the Minister of Long-Term Care then, and she talked about how this is going to go ahead. But that was the day that the pandemic was officially started, because, so then that was held up for years. So I was able to express disappointment about the funding model and how we've been waiting 15 years essentially to get this going, and we're always waiting on the ministry. But yet we suffered the challenge of delays. There's some benefit going to Maxwell Manor. They just had their the groundbreaking in Maxwell Manor, and so we had a discussion with the Minister of Long-Term Care, the new Minister, Kachandova Bashta, to discuss the challenges that rural communities face and how rural communities and the fundraising that goes on in rural communities and the small tax base, the small populations are funding these major infrastructures that are needed in our communities, and how it falls on the shoulders of a few taxpayers. We support it through taxation. The counties support both through taxation, and there are some of us in this room right now that support it through donations. And we're not the GTA, we're not Belleville, we're not Brockville, we are North Dundas, much smaller. And I had a chance to talk about the challenges that small communities face to put up these needed buildings to support our seniors. And today, I had the opportunity before the meeting to go to Dundas Manor, and it was a welcoming event for. There were 15 new hires there, and the new hires, they're PSWs, some nurses, some RPNs, and there were 15 present today. There were a few missing, a few that weren't able to make it, and I had a chance to welcome them to our community. There was one lady from moved here from India, moved to work at Dundas Manor from India. There are two from the Philippines. There was a few ladies from Cameroon, and one from Ghana. Is that correct? Ghana? From Ghana. And the balance were from Nigeria. And these folks have come over to our community to look after our seniors. And it was quite a story from some of them. They talked about how their husband is in Nigeria yet. They have 4 kids in Nigeria. Their parents are still in Nigeria, and they've decided to come here to support our seniors for employment. It's needed employment. So kudos to them. It was a nice day to be there with them and to hear their stories about how they left their home to come here to look at. But it was also interesting how they view seniors and how they saw there's an opportunity to respect their parents and grandparents by providing the service to other seniors as a way of remembering their seniors, remembering their families. So that was some of the things that I've been up to lately. But yesterday, besides today being a very heartwarming day, yesterday's day with the minister was very, very exciting to have someone sit and listen in my office to the challenges that we face here in North Dundas. Anything else? Councillor Lennox.
Not as important as yours, but I'm really glad to see the TV on rollers vice the paper bricks it was on before.
It was quite distracting, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it bothered me too. Yeah. So we're going to go to adjournment. It's moved by the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Annable. If I haven't forgotten anything, Madam Clerk. The council adjourned at 6:41 p.m. to the call of the chair. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you very much.